bringing you a story from Charlotte, North Carolina, which is my hometown. Happened a long time ago. I never had any fireworks in my whole life when I was growing up in North Carolina because my father wouldn't permit it. And he had a very good reason. And we knew that reason because it was a legendary story in our family. Now, the person that told this story the best was his sister, Catherine. I'll tell you about the day your daddy blew himself up. And I would sit down ready anytime she came about it. And by the time I was 8 or 9 years old, I could tell you this story myself as though I had been there. My daddy's family was large. There were 8 kids in it. He was the 4th. Catherine was the 5th. And they lived at 826 Central Avenue in Charlotte in a fairly big house to accommodate a family that size, and it had 2 bathrooms. Anyway, down the street was an even bigger house, the Heath Mansion, and it was tall, 2 stories, white and stately, and a row of columns marched across the front of it. The kid that lived there, Morgan Heath, was my daddy's best friend. Every time your daddy got together with Morgan Heath, there was gonna be trouble. We all knew it. Trouble was coming. Now, one day, Ellouise, Robert had gone up to the Heath place, was playing with Morgan. Morgan was 13. He was 2 years older than your daddy. Robert was 11. And they decided that they would check out Mr. Heath's gun closet. They went into the library, and Morgan went into his daddy's desk, and he got the key, and he opened the door. And when they got into the closet, I don't know what they would have done if they had taken to the guns, because they found something else. They found a jar of gunpowder, and they got a different idea. And they took that gunpowder down to the back of the Heath property where there was an old peach orchard. And they sprinkled it all around the base of a dried up peach tree. And then they sprinkled a fuse line all the way to where they thought they would be safe. And they went, scratched a match, and they set it on fire. And they waited, and they waited, and nothing happened. So Morgan looked at Robert, your daddy, who was the younger, and Morgan being the older. And he said, Robert, go down there and see what's happened. See what's the matter with that. And do you know something? He did it. He ran down there and he bent over that tree stump to see what had happened. And just as he did, kaboom! And it threw your daddy up in the air. And he fell down like a rag doll spread out on the ground. Morgan took one look and he started running up the street to Dr. Gallant's. He had an office in his house just across the street from where we lived. Dr. Gallant had heard the explosion, and he was already coming out of his house with a big tin can of Ungentine under his ointment under his arm. And when he got to your daddy, he stuck his hands in and he started slathering Ungentine on that boy like he was a piece of white bread and it was mayonnaise. Picked him up, put him on the back seat of his car, and started off for the hospital. When he got to the hospital, Mother Rayfield took one look at him and called the priest. They didn't think he would live through the night. Now, at the same time, Ellouise, just listen to this, at the same time, out at the country club, Daddy was playing golf. And at a certain moment, he dropped his clubs down on the green, and he said, something terrible has happened at home, and I've got to run. And he started running, and he was running up toward the clubhouse. There was a man running down to him, screaming, Mr. Diggle, something terrible has happened. When he got to the hospital, Robert was just like a mummy, wrapped up in bandages, only 2 slits for eyes and a little hole so that they could feed him with a straw. They didn't think he would live. Oh, Lordy, Lordy. Well, but he did, obviously, because I'm here today to tell you about it. And he only had one little scar on his wrist. Daddy, please, let me see where you blew yourself up. And he would pull up his sleeve and show me the little scar. 68 years later, in Charlotte, on a hot August afternoon, something like we're experiencing now. It was so hot, so humid that your pantyhose were sticking to your legs. I was at the Hankins Whittington Funeral Home, laying out the pictures, and my daddy was in his coffin in a little alcove in a flag-draped casket. There was an uplight at the foot, at the head of his casket, and he was bathed in a golden glow. And just then, somewhere, a truck hit a pole down the street, and all the lights went out. The next day in the paper, it said that that truck hit a pole that held a transformer, and it blew up, and sparks filled the sky like a skyrocket, I can't think, firecracker demonstration on the 4th of July. I turned around. Daddy's lights hadn't gone out. They were battery operated. In the darkening room, he was laying there still in his golden glow. I had laid out the pictures. I heard behind me my Aunt Catherine's voice. Move that candle over here. I want to see these pictures. She picked up the album. Look at that. There's Robert in his striped suit next to Daddy's knee. Wasn't he cute? Do you remember the day that he blew himself up? I couldn't help but laugh because I could just hear it the next time she started telling stories. Let me tell you about my brother. He went out with a bang.